Who are the Scots Irish? A question that reaches across centuries. A question carried in family stories. A question whispered through surnames, migrations, and memories. To understand the Scots Irish, begin with a simple truth: identity is rarely one thing, it is a weaving of language, blending of borders, a story shaped by movement and survival. The Scots Irish were not born from a single moment, they were shaped by a long journey from Scotland's lowlands to the northern coast of Ireland and later to new lands across the Atlantic. Their story begins in the 1500s in a Scotland marked by conflict, agrarian hardship, religious turmoil, and the shifting power of clans and crowns. Most of the people who would later be called Scots Irish came from the Highlands, but from the lowlands regions like Ayrshire, Regal or Old Airks against the Scottish borders. These were farming familiars, Scraffmosums, landholder Spiel, who spoke Scots, a Germanic cousin of English and Gaelic. Their world changed rapidly. Harvest failures strained communities, fords flared across the borderlands, and religious divisions grew sharper, especially between Presbyterians and state-backed churches. During this same century, England sought to control Ireland, and strategy was the plantation of Ulster, a plan to settle loyal Protestant families in the north of Ireland to secure political and economic influence. Between 1609 and the decades that follow, tens of thousands of lowland Scots crossed the Irish Sea, most sailed only a short distance from ports that faced Ireland directly. Arriving in Ulster, they built farms, marks, reshaping tightly knit Presbyterian communities. These settlers became known as the Ulster Scots, a term still used today in Ireland to describe people descended from this migration. Life in Ulster brought new opportunities, but it also brought hardship. Tensions rose between settlers and native Irish familiars. Economic pressures deepened and political struggles intensified. At the same time, Scots in Ulster held tightly to their identity. They kept their surnames, their Presbyterian faith, and their sense of community. Names like Campbell, Hamilton or Tranters, MacDowell, Beckham, deeply rooted in Ulster. Their spellings sometimes changed, but their origins remained distinctly lowland Scottish. Across the 1600s and 1700s, these families lived between two worlds, Scottish and Irish location, Protestant in religion and shaped by the evolving politics of the British Isles. By the early 1700s, a new era began. Economic pressures, rising rents, crop failures and religious discrimination to many Ulster Scots to make another journey. This timidly crossed the Atlantic from the early 1700s to the mid-1800s. Hundreds of thousands of Scots from Ulster arrived in North America. Most landed in Pennsylvania, others reached Virginia, Carolinas and the Appalachian frontier. In America, they gained a new name, Scots Irish, sometimes spelled Scotch Irish, a term rarely used in Ireland itself, but firmly rooted in America's history and cultural memory. The Scots Irish formed some of the earliest frontier settlements. They became farmers and turnstick traders. They shaped the culture of Appalachian American folk music and played key roles in early American expansion. But behind the frontier image were families with long stories carried in surnames shaped by movement stories that connected Scotland, Ireland, the New World. Consider the surname McKinley, originally MacFie Lame Young, son of the White Warrior, a name found in both Scotland and Ulster, later carried to America where it reached the presidency. Or the name Morrison, meaning son of Morris, a blend of Norse and Celtic influence common in the Western Isles but also deeply rooted among the Ulster Scots. Names like Armstrong and Eliot's border clans of Scotland found new life in Ulster and later along the American frontier. When these families arrived in America, many were described as tough, resilient and fiercely independent. These traits were not accidentally, were shaped by generations of hardship, generations spent navigating competing kingdoms, religious struggles and life on contested lands. The Scots Irish brought with them a strong tradition of storytelling, facing communal gatherings. She carried memories of the lowland ballads, memories of Ulster's rolling hills and a determination to shape their own destinies. They built log cabins, brought with them distinctive fiddle music and contributed to the formation of American folk traditions. Their Presbyterian heritage shaped early American religious movements, and their frontier presence influenced the spread of settlement across the mountains. Despite their influence, said Scots Irish, who often misunderstood them, assumed they were Highland Scots. Others think they were simply Irish. Truth is more layered, more nuanced, more deeply woven into centuries of movement. The Scots-Irish identity sits at a crossroads between Scottish ancestry, Irish landscape and American reinvention. Their history is a story of borders crossed, languages blended, beliefs preserved and customs carried forward. To understand who the Scots-Irish are, just look at all three chapters. Scotland's the New World each shaped their character, each shaped their names, each shaped the culture they carried. Even today, Scots-Irish surnames offer clues to the past. Names ending in son or tun often point to Scottish lowland origins. Names with Mac or MC may indicate either Highland or Lowland roots, but spellings common in Ulster Scots, McKean, Quillen and McHenry often trace back to the Scots who settled there. Presbyterian meeting houses across Ulster still show inscriptions from early Scottish settlers. American Countess Mountains Townscary name brought from Scotland. Names that shaped the identity of frontier families. The Scots-Irish story reaches across oceans, across wars, across centuries of change. Yet the heart of the story remains complete. Is a story of people seeking safety, seeking stability, seeking land and seeking a place to belong. Today millions of people trace their ancestry to the Scots-Irish. Some know it through family stories, others through DNA tests, some through a familiar surname passed quietly from one generation to the next. Their history lives on in music, in language, in cultural memory, and in the stories families continue to tell. Who are the Scots-Irish? The descendants of lowland Scots were settled in Ulster and later helped shape the identity of early America. The people whose names carry centuries of movement, centuries of resilience, centuries of blended identity. Their story continues, and so does the search to understand them. To understand the Scots-Irish more deeply, we look beyond dates and migrations. We look into the human story that shaped them. Their identity was built from layers of memory, from the farms of the Scottish lowlands, from the windswept shores of Ulster, and from the rugged mountains of early America. Each landscape left its mark, each chapter added something distinct, and each generation carried its own version of the story. In Scotland, they learned resilience, communal strength, and a deep respect for education and faith. These values would guide them for centuries. In Ulster, they learned to adapt, to navigate tension, to survive economic hardship, and to hold tightly to community bonds. In America, they learned possibility. They built new lives on unfamiliar land and turned frontier challenges into defining traditions. Their surnames reveal these journeys. Take the name Crawford, a lowland family rooted near the River Clyde, a name carried into Ulster plantations, and later into the American frontier. Or the name Wallace, from the Old English word for foreigner, a name tied to Scottish resistance, later found in Ulster parish records, and eventually woven into American settlement history. Names like Boyd, Dunlap, McBride, and Ramsay all trace the same path, Scotland to Ulster to America, a three-part lineage carried in every generation. This pattern shaped more than identity. It shaped culture, music, migration routes, and family traditions. The Scots-Irish brought with them a musical heritage. The fiddle tunes of the lowlands blended with the rhythms of Ulster and eventually gave birth to American bluegrass, old-time music, and Appalachian folk traditions. Their storytelling traditions also survived. Tales of clan ancestors, border feuds, Scottish kings, Ulster farmers, frontier hardships, and personal courage. These stories created a unique cultural memory, a sense of being shaped by history, but never defined by struggle alone. The Scots-Irish were known for independence, but also for strong family networks. They valued hard work, directness, practical thinking, and spiritual resilience. These characteristics shaped early American communities, especially in the mountain regions, where isolation demanded cooperation and survival required both strength and adaptability. Many Scots-Irish families became influential in American politics, education, and military service. Their legacy appears in presidential lineages, in state histories, and in cultural traditions that still thrive today. Yet their story remains surprisingly hidden, often overshadowed by larger historical narratives or misunderstood as a single moment in time. But the Scots-Irish story is not a moment. It is a continuum, a thread stretching from medieval Scotland, through the plantation era of Ulster, into the early frontiers of North America, and onward into the modern world. Today, millions of people carry Scots-Irish ancestry, sometimes without knowing it, because the identity blended into larger cultures quietly, naturally, almost invisibly. But the marks are still there, in family names, in regional traditions, in music and speech patterns, and in the stories families keep. The Scots-Irish remind us that identity is layered, not fixed, not simple, but shaped by journeys, choices, and the places where people seek belonging. Their history shows how movement creates new cultures, how hardship can build resilience, and how ordinary families, across centuries, can leave extraordinary legacies. So who are the Scots-Irish? They are the descendants of lowland Scots, rooted in Ulster, shaped by frontier America, and carried forward by generations who remember, even if only through a surname. Their story continues through anyone who carries their names, anyone who inherits their traditions, anyone who feels a connection to the winding path that shaped them. The Scots-Irish are not defined by one land, but by the crossings between them. Not defined by one culture, but by the weaving of several. Not defined by one moment, but by centuries of movement. They are a people shaped by history, sustained by community, and remembered through the quiet lines of ancestry. Their legacy lives on in the hills of Ulster, in the farms of the Scottish Lowlands, in the mountains of Appalachia, and in every family who carries even a trace of their story. This is who they were, this is who they are, and this is the story that continues wherever their descendants live today.